Well, good morning, everybody. Good to see you. Well, are you ready for story time? Uh, we are going to be telling stories this morning to undo stories, right? We're going to be focused within the world of Buddhism for the most part during our talk this morning. And we're looking at the earlier schools of Buddhism, known as the Theravada. Tara means elder and Vada means teaching. So these are the teachings of the elders. And like I had said, it's the earliest phase of Buddhist teaching. We're going to be looking primarily at the Burmese and the Thai forest traditions, if this matters to you. And some wonderful people that have represented these traditions and their stories, or at least one in particular. So we're going to get into it. I think it'll be a lot of fun and enlightening, of course. And we're going to also look to cultivate this attention that we learn from the teachings of the Buddha. Okay? A close cousin to Buddhism, at least in China, was the teachings of the Tao. And you've, I'm sure, heard of the Tao and heard me speak of the Tao many times. So I think to wet the whistle this morning, we're going to be hearing the wisdom of Lao Tzu, known to be the author of the Tao Te Ching. So this comes from chapter 38 of the Tao Te Ching. And when he speaks of the master, he's speaking of the potentiality within all of us, right? So there's really only one being here. And this is what these teachings are designed to actualize, right? That we are the only clear light in existence. And we are distorting that clear light through attachment and aversion and stories and all kinds of things that we get preoccupied with and limited by our emotional states, etc. So that these teachings are designed to untangle us, the real awareness that we are, from these false associations, so that we can shine in the present moment in all of our perfection and joy and clarity, right? So remember, these teachings, whether it's the Tao or when we get into the teachings of the Buddha, it's always a here and now event. So that's why they put a lot of emphasis on practice. And the practice is basically clearing the mirror of your mind, right? And so the master is you as we begin the teachings of the Tao this morning. The master doesn't try to be powerful, thus he is truly powerful. The ordinary man keeps reaching for power, thus he never has enough. The master does nothing, yet he leaves nothing undone. The ordinary man is always doing things, yet many more are left undone. The kind man does something, yet something remains undone. The just man does something and leaves many things to be done. The moral man does something, and when no one responds, he rolls up his sleeves and uses force. When the Tao is lost, there is goodness. When goodness is lost, there is morality. When morality is lost, there is ritual. Ritual is the husk of true faith, the beginning of chaos. So you could see the primacy of direct experience that these teachings want us to pay attention to, that the Tao is the very being of who we are. It's the breath behind our breath, right? The awareness that we are. And it flows through everything. And so when we settle the mind and quiet the waves of thinking, we come naturally to rest in this clear light of awareness. And it's an instantaneous recognition, a knowing again that we are this primal being. And all is this primal being. And there is peace, there is freedom from suffering, there is direct understanding of the self or who we truly are. When we lose connection to the primacy of this knowing the here and the now, then we are putting on a mask. And the mask could be the mask of a good person, right? And so we're still doing goodness in the world because we know that the Tao or God is good. And so we're a good person wearing a mask. We're not the Tao. We're the good person. We've gone into dream, but it's a noble dream. And then if we are losing touch with that authentic goodness, then we put on, as he says, morality. And morality is living by these codes of conduct. You should do this, and you shouldn't do that, right? And oftentimes these codes of conduct are given by people or teachers or masters outside of us, and we think we have to take those and apply them in some kind of an artificial way, and oftentimes with a lot of repression of our basic instincts and such. And so morality is another degenerate phase. The moral person is a thickening of the mask. And then he says, when even that is lost, you're just going through the motions, right? Like when I grew up going to church as a Catholic boy, it was just, you had to go, and it was horrible. I'm sure many can relate. And not to say that the Catholic faith doesn't have its beauty and its deep symbolism, but I didn't know any of it. And all I was seeing was the outer husks and the rituals. And as a little boy, my mother's purse was my salvation. Whatever I can find in there, a pen and paper and Tic Tacs and whatever else, like that was my meditation, the contents of my mother's purse. And so the ritual was just this empty shell, as Lao Tzu is saying. There's no juice, there's no realization. Not that there couldn't be, and the ritual could be a carrier of that experience, but if the experience is lost, the ritual has no bearing on the mind. And so that's when he says, when we lose the goodness, the morality, and then we're lost in ritual, we're just a step away from chaos. And I think our society has taken that step collectively. I mean, we don't really have rituals anymore. And you could see then the call to practice, the call to come back to our true roots. And this is what one of the intentions I have in this service is to bring us to the root, is to bring us to this direct experience. And hear the voice of the ancients as our voice, right? Here's another one. Fame or integrity, which is more important? Money or happiness, which is more valuable? Success or failure, which is more destructive? If you look to others for fulfillment, you will never truly be fulfilled. If your happiness depends on money, you will never be happy with yourself. Be content with what you have. Rejoice in the way things are. When you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you. So this idea of deep contentment is one of the fruits of practice, because as we become still within our mind, we get to a place of, like we've been saying, this deeper knowing and this resting in the nature of our own mind. And that itself is joy, wisdom, and peace. There's no thing called peace or joy. It's not out there. And so as we quiet and get still and release all of these artificial trappings and coverings and masks that we've been wearing, the roles that we play, like this is part of the practice. The practice is a disrobing, a stripping down, a letting go. Right? That's why in Tibet the primordial reality is often referred to as naked awareness. Awareness as it is. And so when we come to this place, we realize we have and are everything. There's really nothing to seek. There's nothing out there as far as stimulus that's going to make us happy. And this is a, concept that you can then take into practice. And when you start to practice it, you realize that this concept was pointing you directly back to the immediacy of who you are as this awareness. And then when you can enter that through this practice, you realize the concept was true. The concept was an accurate description of this direct experience. If you stay in the realm of concepts, it's like looking at a menu when you're hungry and reading the description of the eggplant parmesan and going, doesn't that sound delicious? But are you still hungry? Yes. So the practice is you have to get into the experience. The concepts point you to it like a menu. Yes, I'll have that, thank you. So this is an important aspect of this type of teaching. Remember, the Buddha is always saying, I am merely a finger pointing to the moon. Don't focus on the finger. Go in the direction in which the finger is pointing, the moon being your own awareness. Here's a good one for us this morning. Without opening your door, you can open your heart to the world. Without looking out your window, you can see the essence of the Tao. The more you know, the less you understand. The master arrives without leaving, sees the light without looking, achieves without doing a thing. Very counterintuitive to our Western way of conditioning. So one of the things that we as Westerners will come up against in practices like Taoism and Buddhism is our habit patterns have ingrained themselves so deeply that we think we are our habits. We're very mechanized in our deeper conditioned mind. And so as we sit and just let everything settle and get quiet and we begin to become aware of what's coming up in the practice, just being an open sky, allowing everything to sort of just bubble up and, show itself, you'll be surprised of how conditioned and robotic and programmed much of our life has been. And that's why Buddha's name, he wasn't born Buddha, as you know. It was a name given by him when he was asked, what are you, a god, a savior? No, I'm awake. I'm Buddha. Buddha means awake. When we're in the mechanized, habitual, conditioned mind, we are asleep. We're in trance. And so, often, if not for most, if not all of our lives, if we don't come across a teaching like this, we stay in trance. There's that famous story in Search of the Miraculous, teachings of Gurdjieff. Ouspensky, who's the author of the book and a student of Gurdjieff at the time, was being taught by Gurdjieff this idea of self-remembering, right? Which is mindfulness, basically. You're paying attention. And I invite all of us to do this right now. You're paying attention. You're aware of what it feels like to be sitting here. You're aware of what the shirt feels like on your back. You're aware of your breath and your abdomen expanding and contracting. You're aware of all of these micro moments that are going on in your perception, your feelings, right? Your thought moments. You just become more tuned in to what's really going on. And so Ouspensky is practicing this self-remembering, being aware, watching clearly. And he says when he first started practicing this, it got to a point where he put his pants on in the morning, and then he came home and he's, getting rid of the traces of the day, and he's like, wait a minute, I wasn't aware the whole day. Like he was trying to practice self-remembering, and he got to the place where he realized, I went through my whole day in this habitual, mechanized trance. And so this is, even when we're starting to practice, we will begin to notice this. And so this is something that the Buddha's teaching really does expose and uproot. That no matter where we think we are, we're oftentimes looking through a lens. Like yesterday, I was pet sitting and walking a dog, and on the street where we were, there were 4 beautiful cranes eating on the front lawn. And we came upon them suddenly, and we're like, oh my God, right? So I get my phone out because I want to capture the moment. So I'm looking in the video, I'm looking through my phone at the cranes, and I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, I'm missing this moment because I'm perceiving it through a screen. I'm literally using an artificial lens to experience this moment. So I kept recording, but I had to, not look at the screen and just be there. And it occurred to me that we're all looking through screens all the time. We're looking through the screen of our stories. We're looking through the screen of our judgments, our conditionings, our fears, our anxieties, and they're coloring the moment. And so we're not really here. We're in this far-off place of our conditioned mind, often, haunting the past. That's why in A Course in Miracles, he says in one of the workbook lessons, my mind is preoccupied with past thoughts. I see only the past. And it's very sobering to think of it this way. And less gentle than Jesus in A Course in Miracles was Lin Chi, a great Chinese Chan master. And he would look out at his disciples and call them a bunch of ghosts. Well, what's a ghost? A ghost is someone who's dead, haunting something that's long gone by. Wandering spirits. Right? And so to be in the here and the now is to be without any lens, any conditioning, naked awareness, awake, Buddha. That's our nature. So when we think of Buddha as this somebody or something outside of us, it just shows how much of a sleep we're in, how conditioned away we are from our own direct knowing of self, of who we are. Right? So, story time. Maybe you've heard of Deepa Ma. No? Deepa Ma, you'd probably want to get to know her. She passed away in 1989. She was born in 1911 in Bengal. Her family lineage goes all the way back to the first Buddhist families in India. So Buddhism got thrown out of India in about 1000 of the Common Era. But there were certain family lineages that stayed true to the Buddhist teaching. Deepa Ma's was one of them. Her birth name was Nani. As we'll see, her name Deepa Ma refers to her giving birth to her daughter Deepa. So she's mother of Deepa. But Deepa means light, so she can be referred to as mother of light. She was born, like I had said, in Bengal, and she grew up really attracted to the Buddhist teaching. She would make little statues and such. Very unusual child, didn't want to do the ordinary things that children would do. Very devoted. Always wanted to meditate, but in her time, in her culture, not given that choice. And at 12 years old, it was customary to marry the daughter off before she menstruated. So she married a 25-year-old engineer and went to go live with his family. And so at 12 years old, she's taken out of her home, very close to her mother, but now she didn't see her more than twice more in her life. and her in-laws were not very nice to her, and her husband, on top of it, had to go to Burma to get a new job as an engineer. And so eventually when he secured the job, she went to Burma to go live with him. So doesn't know the language, doesn't know anyone, home all day, and he's, doing his thing. Thank God he was a gentle and kind and loving man, because she wasn't able to get pregnant for a long, long time. And so he was very compassionate. But when he did go home to visit his family, she stayed in Burma. His family, knowing she couldn't get pregnant, had arranged another marriage for him and basically just leave her in Burma or whatever. But he said, no, I wouldn't do that to her. I married her not for the sake of having children, but I was, devoted to her. And so I don't want to, go into too many of the details here, but she eventually started to practice, and she wanted to go to a retreat in Burma. And the first day there, she's meditating and going through the practices and walking to the meditation hall. And then the next thing she knew, she couldn't take another step. And she was in such intense concentration, she didn't realize that a dog had bit her leg. And they couldn't get the dog off of her leg. And so finally the monks came, got the dog off of her leg. She's getting rabies shots in the hospital. And because she was missing the meals at the monastery, she became very sick and had to go back home. And she thought she lost her opportunity to practice. So eventually her husband had to now take care of her and their little child, Deepa, and he grew old, and he had a heart attack and died. So her mother died the year before, her husband died. She had lost 2 children, one after 3 months and one right after birth. So this woman was just riddled with suffering and difficulty and struggle. And so she didn't want to live anymore. You could tell she was kind of ebbing away. But then her sister came to live with her sister and her sister's family. And she was then given an opportunity to practice. And she took to it like a fish to water. And she eventually began to go through the stages of awakening, deep awakening on the Buddhist path. And it says here that on retreat, Deepa Ma's practice deepened dramatically as she moved rapidly through the classical stages of the progress of insight that are said to precede enlightenment, according to the teachings of Theravada Buddhism. She experienced a brilliant light, followed by the feeling that everything around her was dissolving. Her body, the floor, everything was in pieces, broken and empty. That gave way to intense mental and physical pain, with an excruciating burning and constricting in her body. She felt that she would burst with pressure. Then something extraordinary happened, a simple moment. It was daytime. She was sitting on the floor practicing among a group of meditators. An instantaneous transition took place, so quiet and delicate that it seemed as if nothing at all had happened. Of this luminous instant, Deepa Ma was later to say simply, "I did not know," and yet in it, her life had been profoundly and irrevocably transformed. She was very sickly prior to that. She radiated health afterwards. And she had entered into what they call the first stream entry, the first stage in the Buddhist path of insight. So she moves back to Calcutta, India, and she begins to, basically just like a flower, emit the fragrance of awakening. And many people began to come to her for meditation lessons, and she taught in this little rundown inner city of Calcutta. And one of the great things that were part of her teaching was she adapted the Buddhist teaching to people who could not get away from their busy life. So she was giving these teachings that were extremely practical and in the moment. And this is really what I think is of value this morning, why I wanted to bring Deepama's presence into the service. Because it says here, presenting tough but effective lessons for people who wanted to meditate in the midst of busy lives as householders. Deepama taught her students to use every moment as an opportunity for practice. Mindfulness, she said, could be applied to every activity: speaking, ironing, cooking, shopping, caring for children. This whole path of mindfulness, she repeated tirelessly, is this: whatever you are doing, be aware of it. Deepama had so much faith in the power of practice amid the hubbub of home life that one admirer dubbed her the patron saint of householders. When asked about the difference between formal meditation practice and daily life, she adamantly insisted you cannot separate meditation from life. Right? So wherever you are, that is your gateway into mindfulness. Be aware. Be aware right now. Right? And to give you an example of the practicality of her teaching, there was one student, one woman that came to her requesting teaching. She was a widow who had 6 children in Calcutta. What are you going to do? So Deepama's instruction was, believing that enlightenment was possible in any environment, she devised practices that this woman could carry out at home. One such practice that she taught this woman was to steadfastly notice the sucking sensation of the infant at her breast with complete presence of mind for the duration of the nursing period. This amounted to hours each day, and as Deepama had hoped, this woman, Malati, attained the first stage of enlightenment, which we just read about Deepama. The room disappears, the self disappears, there's this wave of deeper knowing that is beyond the body through nursing her child, right? So this is why it's not some exotic, out there, soul journey. It's paying attention one-pointedly to whatever you're doing, whatever sensations are occurring. Be aware, be awake, notice, pay attention. So as we do this in our practice, whether you're nursing or whatever you're doing, notice that the mind will wander. That's what it will do, especially the habits and the conditionings and the inner resistance to seeing through these deep-seated patterns and roles and masks and identities that we oftentimes are unconsciously, robotically embodying. So when we do this, we will bring up these parts of ourself, and our minds will drift. Our minds will resist. Our minds will get annoyed. We'll forget the breath. We'll forget to be aware. And all we have to do is keep bringing it back. No judgment, no commentary, because the commentary is another drift. Bring it back, right? So this is the practice, moment by moment. And, boredom is something that might set in at first because the mind is constantly wanting to be stimulated, constantly wanting to have something to pay attention to. And that's why, the clear teaching of the Buddha was the breath is your number one focal point. So while you're sitting here listening, engage your mindfulness practice by simply being aware of the breath. Breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. I'm aware of it. Breathing out, I'm aware of breathing out. Right? This is your lifeline to the present moment. And it's also going to bring the waves of the mind into a more calm and relaxed state. And when the mind settles, magical things can happen. A little bit more here. One more story. So this is a chapter entitled Seeing Through Our Stories. And one of her quotes is, "Let go of thinking, and your faith will come from within." Because Deepa Ma was able literally to see through the stories of the mind, she did not acknowledge personal dramas of any kind. She wanted her students to live from a deeper truth than their interpretations of and identification with the external events of their lives. Deepa Ma knew all about life's dramas. She had personally suffered chronic illness, grief at the deaths of her parents, husband, and 2 children, and crushing despair. Only when she had gone beyond identification with the stories and dramas in her life did she begin to live as a free person. Right? So stories are suffering. Right? This is what these teachings will clearly show us. We live in our stories about what we think is going on. We're not really seeing, we're looking through the screen of our stories, right? We're blocking what's really here by what we think is here. So here's an example. Sometimes when someone would come to her with their troubles, she would laugh and laugh. She couldn't stop laughing. Finally, she would say, "This problem you are facing is no problem at all. It is because you think this is mine. It is because you think there is something for me to solve. Don't think in this way, and there will be no trouble." Right? So it wasn't like she was being callous or cruel. She was the most compassionate human being. But these stories were literally laughable to her because it's like, we are, as it says in one of the Zen poems, we're like the child of a rich man who has wandered away among the poor. So we are so abundantly wealthy in our true nature. We are all things. We have all things. Everlasting peace and contentment is the core of our being. True fulfillment is who we are. But we've wandered away from it into our stories, which is like the ghetto, which is like a third world country. We're living in the ghetto of our stories, and we think that's who we are. So when we can learn to laugh at our stories, we begin to detach from them and come to a place of true understanding and rest. Right? And then watch your mind. Look how attached you are to your stories. Look at how many reasons we have not to let them go. They're important. They make up who I am. They're valuable, right? They belong to other people too, and this is how we bond together, right? So stories are a way that we try to find the satisfaction and identity in a world that is always, as the Buddha said, unfulfilling. We never think to question, we're not fulfilled because of our stories about what we think everything is. We think we're unfulfilled because we're not getting what our stories say we should have, or we're losing what our stories say we shouldn't lose. But it's the stories, not the gaining or the losing, that is the suffering. Right? And we'll see clearly through that when we sit in quiet and watch, become one-pointed and aware. Now this is a story, when I read it, for whatever reason, it hit me like a ton of bricks. The waterworks wouldn't stop for a little while. I'm not going to cry now, don't worry. So this fella, I believe he's an Englishman. He was told about Deepa Ma through some American meditators, like Jack Kornfield and Joseph Goldstein and Sharon Salzberg. These are like the big wigs of the early mindfulness movement. So they told this guy, go see Dipa Ma in Calcutta. So he was on these intense 3-month-long retreats in Burma, goes to Calcutta. It's getting late. It's a very seedy kind of neighborhood. He's walking through as the sun's setting, so he's getting really kind of, anxious and a little freaked out. And he goes down this dark alleyway where Dipa Ma's house is supposed to be. Now she lives up 4 flights, not 4 flights, many levels, but on the 4th floor of this little shack. No running water, a shared bathroom with all of the other people living there, 1 room with a kitchen that's the size of a 3x6 closet, right? So he finds her here, and he's all about himself, right? This is what he's describing in the story. His spiritual journey, his quest, right? He's really doing it. And so he says, and all of her students had gone at this point, so it's like, personal time, and he's kind of intruding on that, right? So he says when he finally got to her door, I saw a diminutive woman standing outside the door and said something, and she motioned for me to wait. She got her daughter Deepa to translate. I introduced myself and explained that I was a Dharma student and friend of Joseph Goldstein and Sharon Salzberg. She invited me into their small room. I remember sitting on Ma's wooden bed and starting to explain why I was there, telling her about all the intensive practice I had just done and what I had experienced. She couldn't have been kinder or more welcoming. She listened patiently and attentively as Deepa translated, as though she had nothing better to do at that moment than listen to this young man who had just intruded into her home and was full of his experiences. As I continued to talk, something in me started to unravel. It's never happened to me before or since like it did that evening. I've certainly been anxious meeting people before. I've met many other people of note in various walks of life over the years, but nothing like this. The more I talked, the more a tide of panic and confusion rose up and overwhelmed me. My mind started spinning wildly out of control. I think I must have started making no sense whatsoever. I felt completely, utterly abashed. All my grandiosity, all my self-importance, all my experiences, all my sense of specialness and being on this extraordinary spiritual pilgrimage just came crashing down around my ears in a matter of minutes. And Ma hadn't done anything other than sit there and hold me gently in her gaze and attention. That's the power of a saint, right? And the artificiality of everything that we're striving for and think we need and think we have and think we've experienced, it's all just artificial. It's all the trappings, the husks, right? Because we're the Tao. And she's looking at him, knowing that, and pulling him to know that. Beautiful story. So, what a gift to give someone, right? To show them that everything that they hold as valuable is truly valueless and comes crashing down. And that experience of losing everything becomes the treasure that stays with us the rest of our days, because we get to find who we are in that loss of the illusion. Because what we're doing habitually is trying to prop up illusions as if they're true. And we're always panicked and anxious because we're living in a world that is totally impermanent. Illusions come and go. They bloom and fade. And no matter what we try to do, we're not going to hold on to them. And we're very upset about that. And other illusions that we don't want come in and stay longer than we would like and upset us greatly. And so we're being pulled back and forth in this realm of illusion. What if we got to a place within ourselves where all of that came crashing down and we were able to see who we were and then see others for who they were? This is the promise of this practice. And so just like we saw with Deepa Ma and that fellow, Jack Engler, that we just read, this is something that Thich Nhat Hanh brings out beautifully in his book, True Love. He says this: according to Buddhism, we are dealing with samyojana, which is the lump of suffering within us that is translated as internal formation. When you say something that makes another person suffer, that person develops an internal formation. If that person is trained in Buddhism, he or she will know how to untie that knot. If not, he will let it remain there in the depths of his consciousness. If you are a person who practices mindfulness, you will be aware that a knot has been formed in the person you love, and you will know how to untie it. Right? So that's what Jesus says in the gospel, right? You know, if you want to remove the speck out of your brother's eye, you have to first remove the plank that is within your own eye. Then you'll see clearly and help your brother, right? But if we're not seeing clearly, and even if our good intentions or our moral intentions are there, we can oftentimes be, hostile and critical and judgmental to the people that we love, and in the process cause these internal formations, which are basically resentments. And they are harboring that dis-ease in the relationship. And we get around each other and our hair gets up because of these internal formations that are knots within the energy of the relationship. He goes on. Every day we say or do things that might leave behind internal formations in the person we love. Following that, then the suffering and pain can grow, and the person we love turns into something like a bomb that might explode at any moment. A few words are all it takes to trigger anger in this person, who you are afraid to approach and who you are afraid to talk to, because he or she has become a bomb loaded with too much suffering. When you try to get away from him or her, this person thinks that you do so out of contempt, and their suffering increases. You also have become a bomb because you have lost the ability to speak the language of peace, of understanding. You have lost the ability to listen, and so all communication has become impossible. So remember the story with Deepa Ma and that young man. All she did was pay attention like there was nothing else in the world more important. And through that concentrated listening, he got to find the treasure within himself, and all of the knots came down around his ears. Right? If we're harboring pain and resentment, we can't give that to the people we love. If we're trying to use them for our own means, for our own agendas, we can't give that to them. That's why becoming nothing and no one, emptying out through this type of a practice, we actually discover the treasure in the relationship. We actually get to see the person for who they are. We get to help them diffuse the bomb. Right? In everyday life, deep listening, attentive listening is meditation. So try that on as your practice. If you know the practice of mindful breathing, if you wish to maintain calm and living compassion within you, then deep listening will be possible. Through the practice of walking meditation, through sitting meditation, through mindful breathing, we can cultivate calm. We can cultivate awareness. And we can cultivate compassion. And that way, we will be able to sit there and listen to the other. The other suffers as long as she is in need of someone to listen to her. And you are the person who can do it. If someone has to have recourse to a psychotherapist, it is because no one in his house can listen. A psychotherapist should be able to sit there and really listen. But I know therapists who have suffered too much and do not truly have the ability to listen to their clients. So if we love someone, we should train in being able to listen. By listening with calm and understanding, we can erase the suffering of another person. An hour spent in this way, we can already relieve a great deal of another person's pain. So when we think of meditation as just sitting down, lighting incense, doing your practice in this formal, ritualistic way, we lose touch with the Tao. Yes, there is a time for doing the sitting practice. It's very important. You stop, you shut the world out. That's what that is designed to do. You unplug. You get out of the conditioning. And you devote this time to deep concentration and deep insight. But the meditation, as we've been saying, doesn't stop when you get off the cushion. How you tie your shoes, how you brush your teeth, how you drive your car in traffic, and like we're seeing here, how you're listening to your loved ones. Right? So, in order to listen to another the way that Thich Nhat Hanh was just describing, the sitting practice, the meditation practice, is really designed to listen to yourself. Right? You're deeply listening to your thoughts, your feelings, your bodily sensations. You're being one-pointed and concentrated to what's really going on within you. We often are reticent to do that. We turn away. We get spooked. We don't want to confront ourselves. There's too much there. We've lived through too much. And so as we do this, will we face some of those shadows of our past? Yes. Will we face some of the demons? Yes. They will come up. But stay and abide. Don't run away from it. Go through it. Breathe through it. Right? Hold to the teaching that this is part of the path. It's to release the fear, the shame, the guilt, the sadness, the rage. It's all there. We've been running from it. Now it's time to turn and look and listen to it so that we can bring it into awareness and then realize it was made out of illusion. Like we've said before, when you really shine the light of your awareness on these hidden parts of yourself, they don't abide long because they're creatures that live within shadow, within unconsciousness. When you become conscious of the unconscious, these shadows have to dissipate. They're made of lack of awareness, lack of understanding. So the practice is designed to listen to yourself, to nurture yourself, to be intimate with yourself, because how else can you be with another in such a beneficial way if we're not giving it to ourselves first? First, remove the plank out of your own eye. Right? So we'll sit for a few minutes in this deep listening. My suggestion is to avoid mind wandering, at least to minimize it, is to become aware of your breath and to use the anapanasati method of the Buddha, which is breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. And you're following your breath. You're feeling your breath, moment by moment, and all of its ways that it will show up. Be awake. Be aware. So just feeling the deep peace of the present moment, and knowing that you are this peace. You are the present moment. You could even say, breathing in, I am the present moment. And breathing out, I give peace to the present moment. So as you bring your hands to heart, feel that deep-seated peace, stillness within. And perhaps make a vow to be the light of compassion, the force of kindness in the world, and to really begin to dissolve any knots that might be within yourself or in your relationships through this kindness and compassion. And so it is. Blue bag will go around. Thank you. If you're joining on Facebook or YouTube, you can click the link below. We thank you for your support of the 8 a.m. service here at Unity of Stuart. We just give thanks for the offering and charge it with the goodness in which it was given, so that all beings may find happiness and true wisdom, and may this energy be used to help that process. And so it is. Amen.
And an announcement today, at 3 o'clock, they're doing the movie here for Bad Faith.
Bad Faith is a movie that's going to be shown here today at 3 o'clock if you missed that.
It's about Christian nationalism.
It's about Christian nationalism. And a discussion about Project 2020, you said? 2025. Oh, 2025, right. All right, well, let's make sure we don't let go of compassion no matter what we're doing. Recognizing all beings are Buddha. Yes? Let's rise and seal the deal, my friends. And as we come to rest in this heart of peace, where we are letting go of conflict in all of its forms, not that we validate destructive or dysfunctional behavior, but we recognize that the root of all dysfunction and all bad behavior is within ourselves. And it is there that we focus to eradicate suffering and then give that to all beings who do not know it themselves. And then the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us wherever we are. God is. Amen. Have a beautiful day, my friends. Thank you so much.